Last time we talked about the simple games of Prisoner's Dilemma, probably good games, and then we moved to ultimatum and dictator games. After looking at the baseline result, one problem you can ask is, could other factors affect the results? And actually, because the ultimatum game results came out to be disproving what the game theory prediction says, so there were a lot of objections to this, saying that, oh, what if we do this again? What would happen? Oh, the stakes aren't high enough. What if we play with high stakes? What if we do the same game, but not even letting the experimenter know that you are the person that's so selfish? How would that affect the results? Or what are the effects of demographics? Gender, race, major. Are econ majors more selfish than other people? Or what about age? You can even think about how different individual differences can affect this, like how the brain or biology would affect this. Or culture. What is the effect of a different culture? Besides these characteristics, you could even change the game by adding, say, a different context to the game. So you have framing effects here. Or if you can add a move so that this game is now different. Okay, so let's take a look at all these things. The first one is repetition. So if you play the ultimatum game once, you see people reject and people proposing 50-50. What if you play it twice? Would the people still reject? Would the proposers still propose 50-50? And people tried that and find that, you don't see much change. Unless I tell you that, and you are indeed playing selfish robots. And knowing that, then people learn how to play against this robot that's programmed to be selfish. However, you do see people wearing out. So if I keep rejecting these low offers, I might eventually decide to accept some. And so people were curious about, hey, what if this is a satiation of emotion? So your negative reciprocity or your retaliation, you reject so many times that eventually you wear off emotionally. And of course, one way to test this is to say, instead of playing like, say, 100 rounds of the same thing, you can, after playing several rounds, you stop and then tell them to come back tomorrow so that you can restart and to see if this restart effect, this rest or this break would help you start to become tough and reject again. Stakes. So what if we can go to poor countries and give them several months of wage and see if the results change. And so there are modest effects on this, on rejections, but no effects on offers. One possibility is that because these are high stakes, I get even more scared about rejections, and so I would still offer 50-50. So yeah, recently one of my classmates at UCLA ran this very high stake, 1 year's wage ultimatum. They had to use specific instructions to have proposers propose low offers and the respondents accept them. So there you have one, but they have only 10 data points for that experiment. What this means is that stakes do have an effect, but even by giving a lot of money does not really change the effect by that much. Next one. So now how can we try to make the experiment so that even the experimenter is blind to individual results? Well, so the problem here is that if I don't want other people to figure out that I am selfish, one possible reason for me to still donate something in the dictator game could be that it's because I'm afraid of the experimenter knowing that I am this selfish person. And so smart experimenters have found ways to do this. The way they basically run this is, for example, they have the proposer, the dictator come in. On each table, there will be an envelope of $10 bills and a bunch of white slips of paper. And so each person individually decides how much dollar bills to take out, put in your pocket, and then put in equal numbers of white slips of paper, and then seal the envelope, and then put it in a mailbox, and just leave. And after all of the dictators made their choice, then the experimenter goes to the mailbox and then opens up the mailbox and collects these envelopes and says, okay, so number 1 goes to recipient number 1, number 2 goes to recipient number 2, and so on. And then so randomly assigning envelopes to recipients, and then have the recipients come in and then open up the envelope and see how much money is left. So in this experiment, the dictator never sees the recipient, and even the experimenter only knows the distribution of these offers. The experimenter does not know which envelope is whose. And so there you have what we call experimental blindness. And in that case, well, so even the experimenter would not know that you were the person who took all of the dollar bills and ran off with it. Okay, so of course, empirically the question is what happens in this situation? And the answer is half of the people gave 0, and the mean drops to 10% of the endowment. But so it's still not 0. So what this means is that it's still, so this gives you a lower bound of what could happen. You can try to do a similar experiment using the ultimatum game, although now it's very tricky because depending on the responders accept or reject, that would have, so the experimenter has to have some way to correspond this to the proposer's payoff. And if you don't want to know the proposer's identity, that would be difficult. But some people find ways to try to at least reduce experimenter blindness as much as possible. Actually, Colin talks about this in his book in a footnote on how they actually did it. And after reading the footnote and also going to see the original paper, I'm still not personally convinced 100% that this induces experimenter blindness, because there is still some way to figure out who's who in that case. But at least it pushes this, the amount of information to a minimum, and to show that, yeah, so there they don't see any change in behavior in the ultimatum game. And so apparently this self-image problem is not the main concern in the ultimatum game. Okay, next one, demographics. So gender. Here you don't see a simple effect, because so it is true that female people reject less in the ultimatum game, but their punishment, they respond to the price of the punishment more sharper than male. So they punish smarter than male subjects. So it's not the stereotypical result that all male are like what. And race. One problem here is that this is a politically incorrect subject, so there are very few results. But there are some kind of results, like white male repay less to Asians, so that could reflect some kind of social status problem that white males think they are of a higher status than Asians. Majors. Yeah, so okay. So what we actually get, of course, the biggest question people ask is, are econ majors more selfish than others? And actually, so we get mixed results. Well, I mean mixed in the sense that the initial report was econ majors, when they were freshmen, there's no difference. But once they're seniors, they become more selfish than other majors. But attempts to replicate this initial result did not succeed. So some report that there's no difference in general. Others show that in some cases maybe econ majors are more generous than non-econ. So there I'm not sure, because we don't have consistent evidence here. But there was this attempt trying to show that econ majors are more selfish but it was not replicated. Age. So one thing we know from developmental psychology is that so the effect so the idea about fairness is a developed concept, and so people actually try to run this to run the same game from very young age, from kindergarten. And so what they see is that for very little children, they're selfish. So they basically, if they want to split, they split everything. They take everything. But then they become what we call ultra equality or strict equality, up to a point that if I give you, say, 9 pieces of candy or 9 stickers, they want to split it. You get 4, I get 4, and let's cut the last one in half, exactly in half, so that you have half a sticker, I get another half. Yeah, so this is what we call strict equality. And then, but then they start to, okay, half a sticker may not be a good idea. So okay, let's split it 4 and 5. That's equal, a little bit unequal, but fine. Yeah. So you do see this change in terms of the idea of fairness across age. And so kindergartens accept 1 penny. 70%. So this is, of course, very different. Okay, so in terms of biology, so there are a lot of neuroscience research that people try to use neuroscience, either experimental methods to measure people's, their emotion during rejection, or trying to intervene people. And so but one interesting thing is to give people hormones. So hormones. So what people try to do is they have people receive testosterones and try to see how that would affect people's behavior in the ultimatum game. They find that people reject more often, but when they are proposers, they offer more generous offers. So it's like, so there is an effect. There is a biological effect. And the gender effect is this one. So women would actually give more above 50% proposed in the ultimatum game to attractive men. So so the beauty premium here is huge. Okay, so up to here we have a lot of these biological natural characteristics. What about culture? So but it's a little bit difficult to run the same experiment across cultures. There are a lot of methodological issues here. The first one, stakes. If $1 here could mean a lot if I pay $1 in India or in Vietnam. So how do you equalize the stakes will be a problem. Usually what we do is to try to equal purchasing power, say 1 month's wage or something like that. Of course, you can argue about how good is this a way to solve this, but so that's one possible solution, but it's not. Of course, this may not be the ideal solution. So you can think of what are better ways to make the stakes equal. Next one, language. If I do the language, if I translate this English instructions into some local language, how do I make sure that meaning or the framing is not changed through the translation? And the standard way to make sure that things are okay is you do back translation. So suppose you translate this instruction into Kasi, this local language in India. Then what you have to do is you have to back translate it, have another person back translate it back to English, and then compare the original English instruction and this back translation. And there you can see how bad or how distorted is this translation. Another problem. Experimenters. If you send different experimenters to different culture groups, how do you know it's not the experimenter effect? So if you have me being the experimenter in this group, but then a pretty lady in another group, could it be just because the experimenter had an effect? Of course, one problem here is that you have to be multilingual to run experiments in multiple cultural groups. And of course, so what this means is that if you have experimenters that are multilingual, that'll be very useful because you can have the same person be in this group versus in the other group. And usually what you do is you try to control this experimenter effects in your regressions. Another problem is that, well, you hope that you don't have confounds, but you could have a lot of other confounds here. Suppose if in one group you recruit a lot of male subjects, in the other group you recruit a lot of female subjects. Then you have a confound between these two groups, which is gender. And so one way to avoid this is to try to recruit and try to match each cultural sample with the same demographics that you can find, or to try to make sure that there's no confound here. But of course, one problem here is that you might be creating selection bias here because, say, if in one culture it's easier to recruit low income or uneducated subjects. In the other, it's not easy. Then there could be selection bias that so certain types of people that are oversampled in one culture from the other. So, but at least trying to control for all of these observables is a solution, although it may not be the cure-all or silver bullet to solve this problem. Okay, so anyway, so it's not so. Given you try to deal with all of these problems, what are the results? This started because of one of a PhD student at Caltech. He found that there is a group of interesting people back in Peru where in the ultimatum game, on average, they only offered 26%. And the mode is 15. So this is much smaller than the 50-50 mode of the baseline or the other data. So of course now you say, oh great, now we found the ideal subject pool for economists, the selfish guys, right? But if you look at the culture of this group, it's very interesting because they are very socially disconnected. And they have no names for outsiders, for people outside the family. So basically, it's very isolated. It's like every family is living in autarky. So it's that. And so then they said, wait a minute, what about let's go to different cultural groups and to see the variation across culture, and also try to find if there are some kind of joint determinants that we can identify how culture influences people's social preferences. So they ran the same games across 20 culture groups, and some of them are very interesting. Some societies, what you get is hyper fair offers. So I offer more than 50% to the other side, and then the other side rejects it. I always joke that this is like, so if you go out for dinner with Chinese people, you know this. So at the end of the dinner, people start to rush to try to grab the bill and try to pay for everybody. And they said, oh no, I'll pay for it. And then the other side, no, I'll pay for it. So it's like that. Instead of the selfish, okay, you want to pay for it? Okay, you want to pay for me? Great, right? You go ahead. But instead, well, people are offering ultra generous offers, but these offers are actually turned down. But okay, in those cultures, it could be the case that the problem here is that accepting an ultra generous offer in this culture means either an insult. So this is like insulting me, so I have to reject this. Or it could be that the meaning for accepting an ultra generous offer means that now I have a burden to repay. And because of these culture issues, so what they do is they actually reject these hyper fair offers. And okay, so here what you see is that there are a lot of interesting things here across the 10 cultural groups. So every culture is different. And so you see a lot of interesting things happening. So in some cultures, this isolated culture will somehow, people follow what the economists believe is true, which is self-interest. Well, now what? So one thing that they tried to do was to try to find a common factor that explains these things. And one thing that they found there are two key determinants that explains 68% of the variation in the data, which is the first thing is how cooperative are the production activity in that society. For example, in one of the society, you have these whale hunters, where so to hunt a whale, you can't go alone. I mean, you have to form a team. So there'll be people who row the boat. There'll be people who have spears ready to shoot the whale, and there'll be a captain in charge, and so on. So you need a lot of cooperation to actually hunt the whale. And so in that society, there is a lot of economies of scale here, where people cooperating and would actually produce a huge output. And of course, if you are in a hunter-gathering society where you only hunt for rabbits or gather fruits, then you could actually work alone. So so the more amount of cooperative activity in the economy, the more likely that they will form this 50-50 norm. The other one is what we call the degree of market integration. So what this means is that how much percentage of the actual measure that they use is how much percentage of the calories that they receive comes from the market instead of hunting or growing the food themselves. And so this gives you a measure of how integrated is this society or this culture group to the global economy. And so it's like the effect of globalization. And in fact, it's the more market integrated societies, they have a higher tendency for this 50-50 sharing norm in the ultimatum game. So it's not the case that the more you are polluted by globalization, you become more selfish. No, it's the opposite. And my reading of this is that the simple idea of, evil capitalism is polluting everybody and corrupting people's mind may not be the right thing. This is too simplified. In fact, it could be the case that it is precisely because you gain experience in the market trying to realize mutual benefits from gains from trade. So if I'm the buyer, you're the seller, we should split the gains from trade sort of equally. At some sense, you also see this in our classroom experiment, where when we try to, when you do the free-form bargaining, the buyer and the seller would try to sort of split the difference between the buyer's value and the seller's cost sort of equally. And if one side gets a bigger share, and once they figure out, people start to say, hey, why did you guys trick us? Or things like that. So it seems that the equal splitting sort of market norm is something people learn when you are actually in the market and start to bargain. And so market integration actually leads to more 50-50 equal split social norms instead of less. So this is cultural study. So instead of just doing some other cheap stuff, we should do more of this. Of course, this is very costly. I mean, you have to go to all of these places. But, so the data collection is a very important but sometimes undervalued job. All right, next one. What if we label the situation differently? So remember, when we talked about experimental design, we had that the default for instructions is to use neutral language with no labeling to see the baseline effect. But you could give the experiment a particular story or frame and see how that changes the results. Here's the fun thing. So if you use a buyer-seller story for the ultimatum game experiment, you do lower the proposer's offers by 10%. But the respondents don't buy that, so there's no effect on rejection rates. So it could be the case that, yeah, so if this is a market bargaining situation, it's okay to propose lower offers. Yeah. If you write this instruction so that there's a story about how this is about shared resources, then you could also make this make the proposer propose more generously and the respondents be more generous in terms of not rejecting that much. Saying that this is shared resources, a story like this, a frame like this could create a framing effect that make both sides become more generous. Here's the fun thing. So suppose in the instructions I insert one line saying, what would you do if you were the other side? Sort of reminding them to think about the other side. This actually induces fear of rejection from the proposers, and so they'll be more likely to propose a fair offer because they're afraid that the other side is going to reject people. They might reject you. Yeah, so we do have these results here. What we do not have is a general principle or a theory of how to explain these framing results. So yeah, so if you're really interested in framing, you should start to think. Yeah, you should not think about what other experiment I should run because there are already existing results, but what kind of theory can explain this? Yeah, that's a big problem. Okay, so now I'm going to move to try to change the game. So this is what we call structural variables. Okay, so for example, if I tell you, in the dictator game, if I tell you that the other side is this person, how would that affect your result? Or before I do the ultimatum game, what if I have both parties meet each other and shake hands? Yeah. Okay, so what we do know is that knowing the identity of the recipient does change a lot. The first experiment on this was to show to play the dictator game so that the recipient could be either another student or the American Red Cross, and so this charity. And so the idea here is that people might think that a charity is more deserving than your fellow student, and so you're willing to actually donate more. And in fact, we do see people donate more to this well-known charity compared to a fellow student. Although I'm not sure. I mean, if you really know the secrets of the American Red Cross, which is, I think only 10% goes to the actual people who need it, 90% goes to the administrative fees of the Red Cross, then you might not want to donate to more to this well-known charity. But yeah, but there is an effect of knowing the identity of the recipient. Next one. Suppose before we play the ultimatum game, we do a contest and to decide who gets to be the proposer. And in that case, that actually lowers the offers by 10%. So what this means is that, yeah, so if I won the right to be the proposer, I think I deserve a larger share of the pie, or my norm actually changes because I won it. Yeah. What if there is an outside option? So for example, in the ultimatum game, usually it's if you reject, then both get 0, then too bad. But suppose we say, oh, now you have to earn a certain minimum in order to play the next round. Then people start to say, oh no, wait a minute. If you only need $3 instead of 5 to advance to the next round, maybe it's okay for me to just give you 3. Because at least I gave you a chance to go to the next round. But then the problem here is, yeah, so does the other side accept this? And we could actually test this by, even with the one round thing. So instead of, if I reject you, I give both get 0. Suppose they say, if I reject you, so the proposer will get $2, the respondent will get $3 instead of 10. Well, In the original case, so I'm splitting $10, and if I propose 5-5, that's an equal split of 50-50. And if you reject, then we both get nothing. But in this case, if I propose 5-5, that could be fair, right? But wait a minute. If you reject, then the proposer loses $3. The respondent loses $2. So wait a minute. So no matter what, the proposer always gets $2 for sure. The respondent always gets $3 for sure. So that should be your pocket money. So why is 5-5 the equal split? Why shouldn't it be 4.5 and 5.5? Because that's what you would earn beyond the $2 and $3 that you would get no matter what. So what this means is that if I change the amount that both sides receive when the respondent rejects the ultimatum offer, then I could create different equal split points. Because in this case, well, if I propose 4.5 and 5.5, then it's an equal split of the remaining $5 to be splitted. So two and a half to both sides. But of course, different people might have different ideas of what is fair or what is equal split in this situation. And so if the two sides have different norms, then what you actually see is that the rejection rates goes up because you see a lot of disagreements because what I think is fair may not be what you think is fair. Next one. What if I don't tell you what is the total size of the pie that's offered? So for example, if the size of the pie could be either $10 or $15, half-half. Now, when you see I offer you $5, you don't know I am keeping $5 in my pocket or keeping $10 in my pocket. And so, because you know that if it's $5, if the total size of the pie is $10, offering you 5 is a 50-50 equal a fair share. But if I have actually $15 to allocate, then offering $5 is like an unequal split. But if the respondent does not know the pie size, then it's hard for the respondent to decide how to react. Well, because he could be accidentally punishing a generous or fair proposer because it could be the case that the proposer is truly splitting 50-50 of this smaller pie. And because of this, what happens is that the respondents are inclined to reject these low offers because they could be fair. Now the last part is one of my favorite, which is what about economics? So suppose now we have competing offers. So we have two proposers proposing to one respondent. And so basically the proposer would have to compete because the respondent would only accept one of the offers and make a deal and split the money like as proposed. Guess what happens? Now you have perfect competition across these two proposers. So both race to the bottom and try to propose giving the most of the pie to the respondent, because the respondent would always would accept the more generous offer among the two. You could do the flip side to have one proposer and two respondents. Then now it's the respondents that are competing to accept this single proposal, and so even if the proposer proposes to only give 1 cent, well somebody will take it. And so here you actually see the effect of competition coming in. When you have a perfect substitute, either another proposer or another respondent, then you have fierce competition. And all of a sudden, all of the social norms of equal split and all that all go away. And the only thing left is is self-interest and competition. And so you can go all the way down to giving everything to the other side or keeping everything to yourself. Okay, so after seeing all of these things, what's next? So one thing is that it's not the case that experimental economists ran the experiment wrong. They considered all these other possibilities, but what you still don't see is self-interest. You still don't see that everybody is. I think the only place where self-interest is close to 100% correct is when you have competition, but that's the only one. In all the other cases, what you still see is that there are some form of other regarding preferences in play. So one possibility is to say, hey, can I try to use the social preference models to explain what I see in these different in these different experimental results? And so here are some examples, but I will leave that. Before I go on to the next thing, one thing I want to point out is that the first generation of models of these social preferences usually tie everything on the final allocation. Or it's always a preference of payoffs. But what this means is that it cannot explain this, it does not capture reciprocity or intentions. So receiving, say, a tip of $10 is the same thing no matter what. But it could be the case that, for example, for the tipping example, well, if the social norm in Taiwan is no tipping at all, then receiving even a penny is a big thing. But receiving a penny, say, in the United States, where tipping, say, 15% is the norm, is like, hey, are you kidding me? It's like, oh, it must be that the waiter must have done a really bad job to receive only such a small amount of tip. And so, but this is not captured in the first, in either the guilt envy or the ERC model that we see. So to try to get to that, what you need is some kind of psychological game, which we try to put people's intentions into the utility function. And so let me show you one example here. This is the early example. There are, this is also very old, so you can imagine there are further advancements of this, this model. But let me show you a simple example to illustrate what these psychological games try to capture. So here you have, so in a normal form game, you have A1 is player 1's action, and of course A2 is player 2's action, and so on. Belief about other people's action is B. So B2 is player 2's belief about, it's player 1's belief about player 2's action. So it's B2. And then you have a belief about belief. So this is, so what I believe about what your belief is about me. So C1 is about my action, but it's my belief about what player 2 is believing about what I'm doing. And so now the way to define intention is to use the formula for kindness. So how kind I am to you. So this is my action, A1, and my belief about B2 about what you would do is the payoff of your payoff, so pi 2. So this is pi 2, and so I believe you're doing B2. So this is what I believe you are doing, and A1 is what I do. So this is what you would earn under this action profile that we are choosing, and compare that to a fair a payoff on your doing, and divide it by the range of possible payoff, the maximum and the minimum, the range. So this is my kindness towards you. So if I'm above the fair payoff, then I have a positive kindness. If I'm below this social norm, this fair payoff, then I'm not kind to you. So think of this as, say for tipping, then this will be the social norm of how much is the average tip or the acceptable tip in this society. Yes?
How come that in the second function, the payoff for their behavior, that one, that it is functional?
Oh, okay, yeah. So here I have to put B2 or my belief about your action into the function because, for example, in the tipping example, it depends on how good is the waiter doing. So if the waiter is providing very good service, then this is what the social norm for tip is. And of course, if the waiter is doing very bad, then this could change.
Okay, but it's not the actual action of the waiter, but it's the...
Yes, it's my belief. It's player one's belief about, yeah.
So is there a difference then?
Oh, okay, yeah. So in the fairness equilibrium, what we will have is that all of the beliefs have to be consistent. But when we form this kindness structure in the utility function, it's always my belief. And I could have a wrong belief. Yeah. So here we're saying this is my belief about, so that's why we call this a psychological game, because this is everything in my mind. I'm thinking about if you're kind to me, then how kind are you to me? Or how kind am I to you? And so this in equilibrium, my belief will be consistent with what you actually do. But when I think of this in my mind, it's only about my beliefs. And what this means is that I allow for the beliefs to be wrong. Okay, so this is my how kind I am taking action A1 against you, believing that you're taking action B2. So comparing this to a social norm or a fair payoff, and this could depend on what you are doing, B2. But this is what I'm thinking. So it's my belief about what you're going to do, which may or may not be what you actually do. Okay. So then I can flip this. So this is the original formula. This is my kindness to you. This is still player one's belief. It's my perceived kindness, but it's the kindness of you to me. Yeah. So now I'm putting an F tilde. So here, I believe that you are doing B2, and I believe that you think I'm doing C1. So this is my belief about your action, and this is my belief about your belief about my action. So now you know why this is a psychological game. You have to think of this in beliefs. So again, I'm basically taking all of this, but putting it into player two's shoes. So now again, I'm comparing my payoff. Given I'm doing C1, or I'm believed to be doing C1, and I believe you're doing B2, and comparing this to a fair payoff that I have, and then divided by the range of the possible payoffs for me doing C1. Okay, so this is what I believe that how kind you are to me. Okay, so the first construct is how kind I am to you. And the second one is how kind you are to me. But instead of using actions, I'm using beliefs because everything is in my mind. I'm thinking about how kind you are to me and how kind I am to you. Now, so the utility function is this thing. So this is my payoff. Then I have, of course, how kind you are to me. I'm happy you're kind to me. And also I have an interaction term here so that if I believe you're kind to me, I want to be kind to you as well. If I think you're not kind to me, I want to retaliate. So I have this interaction term here. Yeah, so and in equilibrium, we have what we call rational expectations. All of the beliefs have to line up. What I do, this is my action, should be what you believe I'm doing, and should also be equal to what I believe you believe I'm doing. So this is what we call rational expectations. And so the fairness equilibrium is defined when we do have rational expectations about what people do, but with this interesting utility function. And so the key thing here is that, so now we can capture reciprocity, and it's built into the utility function. But it requires this complicated construct about people's beliefs about other people's actions and beliefs about these beliefs, and then trying to capture this reciprocity. And you can use this to try to explain why people would want to, say, play the person's dilemma and accept, or to explain what happens in a chicken game and so on. Okay, so up to here we have a whole bunch of theories, and so one question is, can we run experiments to distinguish which theory can explain the most? And so the next one is trying to do this, where we try to design experiments where different theories will give you different predictions and see which one wins. Okay, so one problem for using social preferences as a way to explain the data is that, is it possible that we could explain everything? Basically, it's not falsifiable anymore, because whatever result I show you, then I can write a utility function so that you are maximizing that particular utility function. And so, yeah, so they have this problem in terms of, in the history of economic thought, actually there was somebody who actually questioned whether or not Milton Friedman's version of what he thinks as positive economics is actually pseudoscience or not falsifiable, in the sense that, well, if you say, oh, the only thing, wrong assumptions is okay if you can make good predictions. But the problem here is that if you cannot falsify your theory, then this is not science. So one problem here is that, so could it be the case that, so every time I see a result, I'll just write a utility function that matches it? One possible way to prevent this to happen is say, okay, now you gave me these social preferences, these utility functions. Let's use these utility functions to design an experiment and see if your predictions fix a utility function. Would that explain what I see in the data? And so this is what people try to do. So here, so these are a whole bunch of ultimatum games. The only difference I do is, so I propose either a equal offer or an unequal offer, 50-50 split, or I keep $8, you get only $2. But what I change is the rejection. What happens in rejection? One way I do this is I just multiply all of the offer by 10%. So that instead of getting $5 each of us only get half a dollar. Or instead of getting $8 and $2, now I get 0.8, you get 0.2. In this case, I'm not changing the percentage or the relative difference between the two, because I'm always getting half-half, or I'm always getting 80% of the pie, and so on. So that's one way. The other way is to do, how about this? So instead of both getting 0, now I'm going to subtract $2 from both sides. So instead of 5-5, now rejecting this offer, both of us are going to get 3-3. Or instead of getting 8-2, now both of us are getting 6-0. And here we are keeping the absolute difference between our payments, but shifting everybody down. And so here, so the fraction is changing, especially here. Well, because now it's 8-0, so I'm getting everything. You're getting nothing. But the absolute difference that I am earning $6 more than you are is kept fixed. And so now you can write down, okay, so what would the rejection rate be if you assume an ERC utility function, or a guilt-envy utility function, or a fairness equilibrium utility function? And then you could actually run the experiment and say, hey, wait a minute. Now what we get is that 38% of the people reject this A2 if it's multiplied by 10%, and 19% reject if it's minus $2 each. And so you can see which model can explain the most of the data. And so this is how science advances. So you fix a theory or a hypothesis, and then we'll design new experiments to actually test your model. And you are allowed to write down new models, but to verify or to falsify these new models, I need new data, new experiments to actually test them. All right, so what have we learned up to now? Well, a lot has been done. Actually, so the reason why on my class website I list review papers which has dozens, if not hundreds, of studies on the ultimatum game, dictator game, well, is because there's a lot that has already been done. So if you want to propose another, the 1001 variation of the ultimatum game, think twice before that. Because what we really need now is, can we find a theory to explain the variety of behavior we see in all these different experiments? That's what we really need to learn. But there's one thing we do know, is that it's almost true that every stone has been turned to try to falsify or to try to disprove social preference. And even in the extreme cases, you still see some other regarding preferences happening. So in that sense, self-interest is not the only story. There are social preferences here. But of course, how do you explain all these different, the diversity of behavior when you change the design, then something else happens? Well, that's the challenge now. The other take out of this is you can see how people design very careful experiments to actually test all of these possible, to rule out these alternative possibilities and to focus on, this result, how robust is this result? And so we can learn a lot from these methods. So one thing we can learn is, what we can do is to think about how can you use these designs in your own experiment to actually design a cleaner experiment to actually run. All right, so up to here we have seen ultimatum games and dictator games. Now we'll go to trust. So what is trust? Or why is trust important?
Trust is the belief that another person does what he or she said.
In the old days in Taiwan, there used to be these sharecropping contracts between the landlord and the farmer. It started out to be verbal contracts. So it's like, oh yeah, so let's split the outcome 50-50, and so on. But then during the Japanese era, there was a shift to, first, more and more people used written contracts, which is a challenge because, well, you have to write down, you have to be literate, you have to know how to read and write to actually write written contracts. Well, as long as you know how to speak, you can do verbal contracting. And so, but eventually they actually forced all of the landlords and farmers to actually use written contracts. And of course, one argument there was because there were cities and more and more people around, so that verbal contracts were not that enforceable because nothing's written down. And so people say, oh no, I did not say this afterwards. And so, yeah, and so even though to write down and enforce written contracts is costly, people even have to, so they actually have to hire these people who write the contracts for them and explain the clauses to the farmers. But people eventually adopt this written contract. So yeah, but it is true that if there is trust, then if I know that you will fulfill your part of the contract, then it's much easier for us to work, right? If I can just say, oh yeah, let's do this way, and you say deal, and that's enforceable, that's very good. But of course, whether or not this is indeed enforceable by yourself, well, that's an empirical question. So yeah, because if we do not have trust, what you do need is a lot of external ways to force this. It could be by force. So mafias run this gray business by enforcing these contracts of the loan sharks. Because if you don't repay the loan, then the mafia would send somebody and beat you up or something like that. Or it could be like some other sort of social sanctions. So it's reported that in Taiwan, when it was a verbal contract, if you break the verbal contract, then everybody else in the village would not be willing to make a contract with you anymore, and so you lose your credibility, and you face this social sanction and so knowing this consequence, people would still hold up to their contracts. But of course, if we could simply trust people, then, well, things would be much easier. So that's why it's important here. But what you do see is that there's different levels of trust in different places. The author of our textbook actually reported this incident where, so he was driving on Iowa, and one of his friends forgot his passport. And so what he literally did was he went to a farmer at the roadside and borrowed his truck to drive back to get the passport and come back. And the farmer said, okay, here's the keys. Of course, I'm not sure if you're willing to borrow your motorcycle or car in Taipei City to a random person that said, oh, I forgot something. Please borrow me your motorcycle or something. Well, yeah, but there is apparently a lot of trust in that situation to actually be willing to actually help a stranger just borrowing the car to somebody else. In businesses, there's this stigma that managers are not willing to cut wages. Instead, they would prefer to actually lay off people than cut the wages of people. And one claim in management school is that because if you cut wages, then you basically break the trust between the employer and the employee, and so that the employees will start to sabotage the company and so on. And so instead of doing that, you might just as well just fire him. And of course, what this means is that there is something that's very important here that somehow, I'm not supposed to lower your wages as a manager. Well, I can only increase your wages. But if I can't do that, if I really want to get to do something, I would have to fire you completely instead. Okay, so so that's about trust. The problem here is how can you measure trust? So back in 1995, Putnam complained that trust is very important. It's such an important thing in social capital, but I have discovered no such behavioral measure of what is trust. So there is actually a world value survey that asks how likely are you to trust the people, say, in your village or in your country or in general for the whole society. So there are ways to survey this. But of course, how accurate are these responses could be a problem. So experimental economists said, hey, let's try to design an experiment to measure what we call trust. And this is what they come up with. And this is usually called the trust game. So it's done by this. It's done between one investor or the principal and a trustee. So the investor has an endowment. He decides how much to invest on the other person. And whatever amount invest is multiplied by a factor m, say 3 times. And then the trustee decides how much he or she wants to repay the investor. So this is like, so suppose I want to start a new company and I need some funds. And I have this brilliant idea of a new marketing technology or a new app or whatever, but I need money. And so the question is, if there is an angel investor who wants to invest, well, he has to think about whether or not he or she can trust me or not. Because, well, if I'm doing a good job, well, his or her investment will become, if I'm the next Google, then it's a very profitable investment. But it could also be the case that I'm a crappy CEO or I just take the money and just run away. And so the question is, how much are you, if you are the trustee, are you willing to repay the investor? And also, how much would you, if you are the investor, how much would you be willing to invest on the trustee? Yeah, so how much would you invest and how much would you repay? Well, how much the trustee is willing to repay could depend on how much investment the trustee received. If the investor invested all of his endowment on the trustee, how many of you are willing to take all of the money and leave? That would be embarrassing, right? Or how many of you are willing to try to repay, suppose it's multiplied by 3 times, then how much would you want to repay the investor? Well, so if it's $100, he invested all of it to you, so now you have $300. Would you want to repay, split it equally, so 150, 150? Or would you at least give him the $100 that he or she invested, or do you want to give him more? That's the problem. And of course, the next question is, if you are the investor, expecting what would the trustee do, how much are you willing to invest? And so this gives us a measure of social capital. The amount that you invest is the amount of trust you're willing to trust this other person. Of course, in the baseline, it's this anonymous other subject. You could change this so that these people are friends or relatives or enemies to see how that changes. And the other, the amount that the trustee is willing to repay gives you the sort of how trustworthy people are. This was done back in 1995, so this is 20 years before. We have 20 years of data on the trust game. Back then, they did this double blind with $10 on the table and a multiplication factor of 2. So each dollar that you invest is doubled. And what they found was investors are willing to put in, on average, 50% of the endowment. And trustee repaid 95% of the dollar invested. So on average, $5 out of the $10 were invested, and the trustee repaid $4.75 out of the compared to the $5 that was invested. Okay, so I already showed you the data, but let's step one step back. What does theory say? Well, if you're self-interest, the trustee should basically grab whatever that's received and just run away. And knowing or anticipating that the trustee would run away with the money, the investor would not want to invest anything. So that's the benchmark or the self-interest prediction. And of course, that's a sharp contrast to what we see here, where so people are willing to invest 50% of the endowment on average, and there is repayment, actually close to full recovery, but slightly. So that means that trustees are not as trustworthy as what the investors hoped, or it's actually not profitable for people to invest because the repayment rate the recovery rate is below 100%. And this has been done through a lot of replications, and investment varies between 40% to 70%. Repayment is sometimes higher. There are, in Kenya, where there's a lot of corruption, repayment is only 55%. So there is a range of behavior here. And there's one exception where so John Van Heyck and his co-authors actually ran so one of this where they had this landlord and peasant frame a story of this, where the dictators landlords would actually take all of the money, and so the peasants would decide to actually invest nothing. So that's the one example where you can actually get very close to what the self-centered, selfish preferences prediction, but that's an outlier instead of the norm. So okay, so what we get here is a variation, and so you could actually use this to actually measure how much people are willing to trust and how trustworthy are people in different situations. And of course, one possibility is, hey, wait a minute, is this trustworthy reciprocity or altruism? If you think of the second stage of the trust game, well, it's like a dictator game, right? You got some money, you decide how to split it. Not quite, because, well, how much you earn, how much you have to allocate depends on what the investor decides to do. If the investor is willing to invest a lot on you, then you got a bigger pie. And compared to if the investor is willing to only give you a little bit, to trust you a little bit, then you get a smaller pie. So yeah, so if reciprocity is going to play some role here, then knowing that the investor invested a lot on you, now you should be happy, or you should be more willing to reciprocate compared to if the investor is not really trusting you. So yeah, so one way to do this is to say, hey, let's compare the results with the dictator game. Because in the dictator game, it's the computer just gave you this amount. So that there is no investor trying to invest. So if you compare that, then the difference between the repay rate of the trustee in the trust game and the dictator game offer would give you which fraction of this repayment is of reciprocity. And if you look at the data, well, so somebody actually ran this and to show that, well, it's 33% versus 30%. There's not much significant difference, so it could be altruism alone. But in another study, well, what they show is that the difference is like 10% more, so it's well, it's significant, but economically small. So there is a small factor of this reciprocity going on, but most of it is explained by the dictator game, but by pure altruism. All right, so now we can go on and say, wait a minute, okay, so what's the effect of the distance of this trust? So let's see how people do this. So they ran this, so in the baseline trust game, so the investor invests to this trustee, and the trustee repays back to the same investor. But if you think of the trust story that we talk about, or say what's the trust of the whole society, this repayment may not be direct. So you can do a foursome design where you have, so the investor, I invest in you, and this other investor invested in her. But then when a repayment, you repay to this investor, and she repays to me. So the reciprocity is not to the same person. Or you can do a whole society design where so each trustee is repaying to a different person in the room. And of course, the closer you are, then basically this reciprocity is more direct, compared to, say, if you know that the trustee is going to repay, but to somebody else in this whole room who knows who that person is, then it's indirect, it's less direct. So of course, one thing you can look at is how does trust deteriorate when you go from a direct reciprocity to indirect reciprocity. So as you see, when you go from a pairwise design to foursome and societal, then the trust rate goes down, and the trustworthiness also decreases. Although here there's a slight increase. Same thing over here. Well, okay, but not exactly there. Okay, so what you see here is that your trust does decrease when you know that the repayment is less and less direct, but trustworthiness may not. So here again you see that the reciprocity component is less here, but there's still also the effect of altruism that does not depend solely on reciprocity that's in work here. So you do see that people's trust do decline, but trustworthy less so. You can actually do more extensions of the trust game. For example, what if I show you your donation history? If I know that, so this person donated so-and-so in the past, how likely would you be willing to trust this guy? Well, people actually try that. So you decide to donate a costly donation, and then based on the history, you can see if there's a history effect here. And what they see is that when you know that your history will be shown, you will donate much more. So yeah, so there is a reason why this building has 介寿馆 on one side and 遗贤馆 on the other, because the donors want their name to be recognized. So yeah, so you actually see this difference here. Of course, wait a minute, why stop here? Why stop at 2 rounds? You could do multiple stage trust game. So this would be more like a centipede game. So I decide how much to invest in you, and the amount is doubled. And then you decide how much to invest on a third party, and it's again doubled. And then the third party can decide how much to invest on a fourth party, and so on. And so this could cycle around for several parties, or just keep going on. Or it could be the case that, how about this? How about that's, it's still between the two of us, but each time we pass, it would become, the money would double. And so we could have, like, say, 5 rounds or 10 rounds of this. And here what you have is that it could be the case that even if I'm selfish, knowing that each time I pass the money, it doubles, I might want to think, hey, maybe I should pretend to be an altruistic type and pass in the first few rounds, so that the money can double several times. And before you take, I'll take first. So there could be the situation where even if you're a selfish guy, you might want to mimic the good guys. And so people actually run this where they have 4 moves, and so each pass doubles the pie, and they ask them, so what would you do in each of the possible nodes? So that's a strategy approach. 30% of player 1s and 50% of player 2s take most of the pie in the first node. And here's another one where they actually have 3 people. So I can pass it to you, you pass it to him, and then he passes to me, and then we can go on to up to 9 nodes. And it could, the pot could go up to $1,500 US, so that's a lot of money. But 1/3 of the games end in the first 2 nodes. So apparently, you can't go all the way down, even though you know there's a possibility to be that rich. But yeah, trust does not go that far.
But 1/3 is still the minority, so maybe, I mean, a lot of persons arrive to 1,500. I mean, you are saying that is still 1/3 is still a big number.
Okay, put it this way. So even though there's a possibility of such a huge gain, well, only 1/3, only 2/3 went beyond round 2. And of course, my guess is, yeah, they will go into the 3rd and the 4th round, but very quickly, yeah, somebody will grab first. And the problem here is that things unravel. Because if I know you're going to grab next round, I want to grab before you. But if you think that I'm going to preempt, then you want to preempt. But at some sense, this does tell us that the glass is both half full and half empty. Because it's not the case that people unravel all the way down to round 1 and everybody takes in round 1. But it's also not the case that people just keep passing like you're just purely altruistic. There is still some kind of strategic component involved that you want to preempt at the right time. Well, one possibility is to do the trust game, because I actually talked about this. There's this trust between the employer and the employee. So one possibility is actually do this trust game in a worker manager situation. So actually, people actually try to run this where they have 8 workers and 6 firms, and they decide to they decide a contract. Firms offer wage W to a worker and suggest this E prime effort level, and the workers accept. If they accept, they choose how much effort to to invest here. And the payoff is the firm earns, so the output is QE, and it has to pay the wages. And the workers earn the wages W, but have to pay a cost. And so the question is, well, because the workers receive this fixed wage W no matter what, but the workers choose the effort level afterwards. So the question is, well, why should the worker work hard? Well, it's costly to work hard, but I will earn the wage anyway. But there could be a gift exchange here that, the firm is willing to give me such a high wage, so maybe I should repay, or I should reciprocate and actually exert high effort. Yeah, so, well, the problem here is that standard game theory predicts that, well, because this is a two-stage game, the workers will just choose the minimum effort, knowing that the firms will just offer the lowest possible wage, because nothing's going to work here. But there could be gift exchange in the sense that the workers might want to reciprocate to the high wages offered by the firm with high effort. Alternatively, there could be what we call efficient wages going on, because we have 8 workers and 6 firms. So it could be the case that the firms, because the firms are offering high wages, and so the worker knows that if I do not reciprocate, or if I do not work hard, next round, well, the firm will fire me. And it's very hard for me to look for another job that gives me such high wages. So yeah, so there could be the case that workers might be willing to work hard, knowing that there's this premium that because of this high wages. And so if I shirk, then next round I might lose my job. And one problem here is that if you do this in the field, it's very hard to distinguish the two. Although you do see, say, Costco is one of the companies that's known to give very high wages and very, very good benefits to its workers, compared to, like, say, Walmart, where the workers in Walmart have almost no health insurance, very low, they earn the minimum wage, and so on. Actually, Costco is even crazier in the sense that Costco actually is committed to promote its employees into management positions. The current CEO started to work in Costco at the front desk, at the checkout counters, and so they have this very interesting corporate culture that they want to treat their employees very, very well. And in fact, it's known that they have the lowest turnover rate of employers in that business. But of course, the problem is this because that people are afraid that if I do something bad at Costco, then I will lose my job and I won't be able to find such a good job anymore in the industry? Or is it because that, Costco is good to me and I should repay, I should reciprocate? Well, it's not easy to separate these two in the field, but we can run a lab experiment to test this. And here's the fun thing. So Fur and Gutcher ran this, and they found that, so the effort level with an explicit incentive has the mean effort level stay flat. No incentives, it actually goes up. So there is support for the gift exchange theory that this is pure reciprocity going on, not that because I face consequences if I shirk. However, other papers actually find less gift exchange. So there are some problems here, or this is still under debate. Actually, one of the famous papers of this was done by John List and Uri Ganese, where what they did was this. So they actually hired RAs to do some RA job, and they tried to give them, say, a surprisingly high wage and see how their performance did and compared to a low wage. And what they found was, so initially there was a boost in performance, but it quickly vanished within a few hours. So their title was Putting Behavioral Economics to Work. So testing for gift exchange in labor market using field experiments, and they did not find a long-term effect of that. Although they do have a problem in terms of the number of observations, because one of their lines said that, we experimented with the individual specific variables found to be important in this other paper and found that their inclusion does not change the qualitative insights. Every time you read this line, qualitative insights, if it does not change the qualitative insights, then what about the quantitative results? Well, if even the quantitative results were still there, they would not report that it does not change the qualitative insights. They would say it does not change the quantitative results. So if you do not say that it does not change the quantitative results, that means that it must change. So it could be the case that they do not have enough data to actually support themselves, but somehow they still got it published. And of course, so what this means is that we do need more data to actually figure out so whether or not gift exchange is that important in these employer-worker relationships. Okay, so what do we know now? Well, we do have to ask the question, so how robust is gift exchange in the labor market, either in the lab or in the field? Well, it's still active. But there's another interesting thing that you can think about is where does trust come from? And actually there's a Nature paper here on this where they actually have people inhale oxytocin before playing the trust game or inhaling a placebo, and to see if people are more willing to trust after inhaling oxytocin. I'm not sure if you know what is oxytocin. Well, it's a hormone that women produce when they're pregnant. I know this a lot because every time my wife was giving birth, she had to take Pitocin, which is the artificial version of oxytocin, to induce labor. And so the idea here is that if you're pregnant, well, what you do need is more trust. And what they actually do see is that when people play the trust game after inhaling oxytocin compared to the placebo, the people are willing to invest more in the trust game. And so there is a biological foundation for people's trust. All right, so to conclude, this lecture is titled Social Preferences. At some sense, it's trying to go against the basic idea in economics on self-interest. But it's not really trying to say that people do not respond to incentives. People do respond to incentives in all of the experiments we actually see here, but what incentives? And so it could be external incentives like monetary payments, but it could also be internal incentives like fairness or altruism and things like that. So but what we do know is that there are plenty of experiments that's run here. So if you want to propose one, don't blindly propose one. Check the literature carefully. And but what we really need is more theory to try to explain this variety of results. And so somebody asked me during the break. I will also emphasize this. So when I showed you the fairness equilibrium, that's just the first model on fairness equilibrium. There are actually 20 years of further development of new theory to try to explain more results that we see coming up. But this is still ongoing. So hopefully we can really get more better theory to explain all what we see here.